The evidence shows an individual that was entrusted to keep Madeline safe made calculated moves to dispose Madeline's belongings and place her body in a wooded area.
Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty against the man accused of sexually abusing and murdering 13-year-old Maddie Soto. Thanks for joining me for Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. The state attorney for Osceola and Orange County has announced that he plans to seek the death penalty against Stephan Sterns, the man who had dated Maddie Soto's mother, Jen Soto, for years. Maddie had just celebrated her 13th birthday when she was reported missing. To seek the death penalty, the prosecutor has to feel that there are aggravating factors. It's the law. And the state attorney says there are several in this case, which I'll get to in just a minute. You'll recall that Maddie's mom, Jen Soto, reported her missing on the evening of February 26th. Jen Soto said Maddie didn't come out of school when she went to pick her up that day.
Supposed to be dropped off at school, didn't make it to school.
Didn't make it to school. I went to pick her up from school today, and she never came out. They announced it over the speaker, and I'm just like, maybe she walked here, because sometimes she'll walk here to this office. I came here, nothing. I went back to the school, they were closed. I got a notice, an email from the school saying she was absent, but I also messaged her teacher, and he looked at her entire attendance today and saw that she was completely not at school today either.
Okay.
So she never made it.
Okay, what's her name?
Madeline. Madeline.
Madeline. Last name?
Soto. Soto.
Soto?
Yeah.
The entire time, you saw Stephan Sterns standing next to Jen Soto during that interaction with the Orange County Sheriff's deputy at the tax office. That was back on the evening of February 26th. Deputies then launched searches for Maddie using canines that very night.
It's gonna be hard to tell whether she went left or right.
Yeah.
But I don't know if she was trying to walk back home on her own or if she was trying to go to her friend's house.
Probably the most I'll say is she would walk back to the grandmother's job. Her grandmother's job is further straight that way. So that's probably like the only way.
Yeah. But the grandmother never saw her.
Grandmother said she never saw her.
Unfortunately, the dog didn't pick up Maddie's scent because deputies would later say she was never at the church.
Our detectives have determined that Madeline was never dropped off on the morning of February 26th near her school. Instead, we believe she was already dead at the time and that Stephan Sterns moved her body in the early morning hours on that day.
Stephan Sterns had told detectives the morning after Maddie was reported missing that he had dropped her off for school early near a church.
She's got this phase that she's been into lately where she's very particular about what car she's seen getting out of in front of the school. She prefers her mom's car, but my cars are, I guess, kind of hoopties. I get it. It's an image thing. But that was sometime probably between 8:20 and 8:40-ish, somewhere in there. It was along this stretch of the road that on the right side that has all the communities on it before you get to the overpass. You could see the overpass from where it was. So it was on that side, on that stretch of road, and that's where I dropped her off. She said she was going to go wait for her friends. She was going to go find them and hang out and wait for her friends. And I asked if that was going to be okay. She said, yeah, it's fine. Kids get dropped off early enough as it is. It's not totally unusual for that to happen. It's just not usually that early that I drop her off. I do school runs every once in a while for her. I said, okay. Let her out. Have a good day. Love you. Thanks. Love you too.
But the sheriff would later say that video from the family's apartment complex told a much different story.
We have video evidence that shows Stephan Sterns discarding items in a dumpster in that apartment complex in Kissimmee at 7:35 on Monday, February 26th. Detectives later recovered Madeline's backpack and her school-issued laptop from that dumpster.
At first, Sterns was charged with sex crimes related to Maddie. Investigators say they found about 1,700 images on Sterns' phone. Some showed things like bestiality, but court documents said many showed Sterns assaulting Maddie, sometimes when she appeared to be asleep. Sterns had asked for a lawyer as detectives questioned him, according to an investigative report. He and a deputy engaged in meaningless small talk as he was driven to jail in early March.
What kind of music you like? You like classical music?
Sometimes.
Huh. You're the first person that's ever said classical music.
In late April, Sterns was finally charged with murdering Maddie Soto.
At this time, the only person being charged is Stephan Sterns. And again, this is not over. There is an ongoing investigation to uncover more evidence, and therefore we can't comment.
At the time, the state attorney said a decision had not yet been made on whether the death penalty would be sought against Stephan Sterns.
The death penalty in this case, we have not decided to what decision we're going to make in that case. We're going to continue those discussions going forward, and we'll let you know again when we make that decision as to whether we're going to seek the death penalty in this case.
Now that decision has been made, and the state attorney says the death penalty will be sought against Sterns. So let's get back to those aggravating factors that are necessary for the state attorney to seek the death penalty in a case. Joining me to discuss those is somebody who's very familiar with this. He's Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg. He is not involved in the case. Dave, thanks for coming on. There are 4 aggravating factors. I want to go through each of these with you. The first that the state attorney down there in Osceola and Orange County says exists is that this capital felony, the crime of murder, was being committed while the defendant was engaged in the commission of or an attempt to commit aggravated child abuse. So Stephan Sterns was already facing these 60 sex crimes related to Maddie. At least some of them were related to Maddie. So they're saying this happened while he was engaged in or in the commission of or an attempt to commit aggravated child abuse. Can we infer from that that maybe Maddie pushed back and said, no, I'm not doing this anymore?
Yes. And under Florida law, you need to have at least one aggravator proven beyond a reasonable doubt before a unanimous jury. Once you've proven that one aggravator, then it makes the case eligible for the death penalty. The defense can put on as many mitigators as they want, and it could be anything. See, prosecutors have a tougher challenge because you have a list of aggravators, and you've got to at least get one of those. Defense could make up anything. It could say, oh, his mother didn't love him enough. His mother smoked in the womb. I mean, you can come up with anything. But the prosecution only needs one, and they've got at least 4, and this is one of them, where the capital felony was committed while the defendant was engaged in sexual battery and or aggravated sexual abuse. And so, yeah, that's where the prosecutors are headed.
This is a Law&Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google users' privacy issues surrounding Google Incognito. If you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/crimefix. Our next aggravating factor that the state attorney lists is the victim being particularly vulnerable because the defendant, Stephan Sterns, stood in a position of familial or custodial authority over the victim. We know that Stephan Sterns lived with Maddie Soto and her mother. Sometimes he hadn't been there for several weeks prior to Maddie disappearing. He shows up on that Sunday night. Monday morning, she's reported missing, and he showed up on that Sunday evening after Maddie's birthday party, her 13th birthday party. And so he was, though, some sort of father figure to her. I mean, Jen Soto, her mother, according to the court documents, let him sleep in bed with the two of them. I mean, Maddie, Jen, and Stephan Sterns are sleeping in bed together, but sometimes apparently Jen Soto was saying, oh, I need my sleep. I have anxiety. So Stephan and Maddie, you can go sleep in another bed together. And that's when the prosecutors say some of this sexual abuse was taking place. So he was a de facto stepdad to her.
Yeah. And because of the facts that we know, and remember, the prosecutors probably have access to a lot more than we know, but even just based on the facts we know, it does look like he had custodial authority over Maddie. And that's why this aggravator exists and will be a cause for seeking the death penalty. Remember, all you need is one, and they've got at least 4.
They say the third one, the capital felony, the murder, was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. As a state attorney, how do you make that determination? Some people would say that all murders are cruel and atrocious. So how do you fit that into that box of especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel?
HAC, as we call it, heinous, atrocious, and cruel, is used a lot by prosecutors when seeking the death penalty. And yes, there's always a matter of subjectivity there, but that's why you seek the death penalty in especially heinous cases. It's not easy to get the death penalty. Before the recent changes in the law, you had to be unanimous. But now in Florida, you only need 8-4. But you have to be unanimous on at least one aggravator. So there are still some obstacles. And yes, the prosecutors can determine based on their discretion that certain crimes are so heinous, so atrocious, so cruel that it warrants the ultimate penalty. And I think the prosecutors made the right decision here.
Maddie had just turned 13 days before her murder, and she had celebrated her 13th birthday, we think, within hours of her murder. So does her age factor into that determination at all?
Yes, there's another aggravator that says if she's under 12, then it would be another aggravator for the death penalty. But the fact that she's still so young does come into the prosecutor's thinking that this is a particularly heinous, atrocious, and cruel crime. So you've got at least 4. There's another aggravator, which apparently is not being used by the prosecutors, which could still be on the table, which is that the killing was cold, calculated, and premeditated, or as we call it, CCP. Perhaps they don't have enough information to say that it was done with pre-planning, but that's another one that is often used by prosecutors. And apparently there's at least one more that they're using if they get a contemporaneous guilty verdict on other crimes that makes him a convicted felon. And that can be used even in the same trial that the current sexual abuse and murder are being tried for.
Yeah, and you bring that up, that fourth one. The defendant was previously convicted, according to the prosecution, of another capital felony or felony involving the use or threat of violence to the person. And then in parentheses, it says the current sex charges against Sterns, there are 60 of them, will serve as priors if he is convicted. So they're using that as the basis to seek the death penalty as well. Crimes for which he's charged and he's facing right now, but hasn't been convicted. But they must feel like they have him. They've got him on those. They have photographic evidence.
Correct. And under Florida law, you can give someone the death penalty, not just for murder, but also for a capital sex offense, which is unusual. I don't know of any other state that has that. And that could be ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court one day, where they could say that's a violation of the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, because we're talking about a situation where you don't have to have someone dying under Florida law. If you commit some heinous sex acts against children, you are now eligible for the death penalty. And the verdict doesn't need to be unanimous in the penalty phase. It just needs to be unanimous on at least one aggravator, but you can vote 8-4 and still give someone the death penalty. This was all a reaction to the Nicholas Cruz case. You remember that's the case of the Parkland massacre, the guy who shot up the school. He was,
right.
They tried to give him the death penalty, and he avoided the death penalty by a 9-3 vote from the jury. And that's what made Florida legislators decide to change the law.
Right. So now the threshold, the vote only has to be 8-4. And we've seen that in some other cases that are pending in Florida right now. So this was not totally unexpected, but I think that they still wanted to have more discussions about pursuing the death penalty against Stephan Sterns. Dave Ehrenberg, as always, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Angenette.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.